Welcome to the Working Mama podcast, a show that provides real-world tips, tricks, and advice to all working mamas on how they can have a career, family, and hopefully one day break the glass ceiling. Hello, Mama. Welcome back to another episode of the Working Mama podcast. I hope you're going well. Today, I'm speaking with Dr. Renee White. She is an all-round amazing human. She's got a Doctor of Philosophy focused in biochemistry and molecular biology from Monash University. She's also a patent law attorney and also the co-founder of Fill Your Cup, which is providing evidence-based care as a postpartum nurturer. And she is just got so much knowledge and experience and also passion about supporting women in the postpartum period. If you've listened to this podcast for a little while, I'll often say, when you're planning a maternity leave, it's, really good to plan your return before you go on leave. But also when you're pregnant, it's really good to actually think about that postpartum period. So if you are pregnant listening to this is going to be an awesome episode for you really to enjoy. But also just even we talk about some of the challenges that we experience as working mums, and also some of the society conditioning, and also just those overcoming misconceptions around postpartum and also preparing for that for fourth trimester. So hope you really enjoy it. It's a little bit different to some of the other working mama topics, but look, have fun. As always, I would really appreciate if you'd be able to subscribe and tell a fellow working mama about this podcast. And this episode is brought to you by the membership, the Working Mama Village. So let's get into it. Welcome, Renee. Welcome to the Working Mama podcast. How's your day going so far?
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Karina. The sun is shining here in Hobart, but it is so cold. Like, I have my mittens here at the desk with me. And I have a heater next to me cranking. But yes, I am having a fabulous Friday. Nothing better than having a chat with you on a Friday.
Oh, can't wait. So Renee and I have actually met through a program called Hack Your Own PR with Adept Barrett. And yeah, if you're interested in PR, highly recommend it. But also Renee and I have actually had and bonded over our passion for supporting mothers and particularly working mothers. So I know a little bit about you. You're an absolute superstar, but let's just get into it. How would you best describe yourself?
Oof. A-type personality. Always learning, I would say, which some people translate that into high achiever. A friend of mine texted me that the other day because I seem to just jump from one project to the next and I struggle to take a breath sometimes, but I'm learning to take a breath. I'm a mum, I'm a wife. I'm probably a high anxiety person and I love to plan. I am a planner. That is what I do. So I think put all of those together and that is essentially what I do for my job.
Fantastic. So what has been your career journey to date?
I have never had a very linear career journey. It's funny that you asked that, Karina, because I used to do career seminars when I was just coming out of science, going into industry. So I started always with an obsession with science, loved experiments. I was that kid using all of my mum and dad's vinegar and bicarb soda in the kitchen, making volcanoes and things like that. So I did a science degree, not really knowing what I wanted to specialize in at the time, but I loved the fact that it was so broad. I just kind of tried a whole bunch of different things, stumbled upon a subject called biochemistry because I literally had to fill a gap in my schedule. And I remember turning up to my first lecture and the guy who was the lecturer, Professor Robert Pike, he showed a 3D diagram video of this particular molecule and it's called a molecular mousetrap. And he showed it attacking another protein. And it was just, I know this sounds so nerdy. It was so beautiful. Like I was like, oh my God, I have found my place. So fast forward, did my science degree, did a major in biochemistry and immunology. Again, obsessed with lab work, experiments and things like that. Did an honors degree, PhD. I love learning.
Yeah.
And so that was mostly on like immune kind of biochemistry stuff. So proteins found in your blood. And then I kind of that was at Monash University. And I was like, man, I've been here for a really long time. I'm part of the furniture. I need to kind of, broaden my horizons. So I stepped out and did a postdoc at the Burnett Institute in Melbourne. I was working on HIV, which was very cool. Like think Dustin Hoffman in Outbreak kind of suits, PC4 facilities and things like that. And at the time, we were working with a big pharma company on a drug treating people with HIV. And as most people know, funding for science is not great here in Australia. And so I thought, maybe we should ask Big Pharma for some cash. They seem to have a lot of it. And so, talking to the business development person at the institute, she was like, yeah, okay, well, you're going to have to put a pitch together. And so she helped me do that. And within that process, there was a lot of work around intellectual property or IP. And I found myself more passionate and spending more time on this pitch than in the lab. And I was kind of tuning into that thinking, okay, there's something here, like I think I want to explore this. And so what ended up happening was I chased the rabbit down the hole. And I became what's called a patent attorney. So someone who joins a law firm, you do a master's in intellectual property law. And essentially what that person is they have to have like a science or engineering kind of background to understand the science. So it would be, let's say someone in a lab discovers, the next cure for cancer. As a patent attorney, I would go and speak to the scientist. They would tell me all about the discovery, and we would then draft what's called a patent specification. And so that details the entire discovery in a huge document. Like they're like, could be anywhere between 100 to 300 pages. And so by documenting that and publishing that, the scientist gets a monopoly for 20 years on it. So it's kind of the law behind drug discovery, treatments, diagnostics, all of that kind of stuff. So I did that for 8 years. And in that time, I had my daughter, which, I don't need to say this, but
we
God,
don't need to.
That is just a life-changing experience
in ways that you never predict.
Up until that stage, you kind of think to yourself, oh, wow, I've worked really hard. This is a really hard job. And then you get to motherhood and you're like, oh my goodness gracious me.
Walk was a piece of cake compared to motherhood.
I know. I was like, I'll go and do some more exams. Like, this is so hard.
And there's no previous study that you couldn't do your master's or a doctorate before you become a mum?
There is nothing in a book that like can give you the A to Z's on how to pass the exam of motherhood, which is good and bad because, for someone like myself, who, as I said, is an A-type personality, I was used to routine, scheduling, time for myself, being able to put those boundaries around and be like, okay, well, this is what I want to do today. So that's what I'm going to do today. And, thinking that that's how my life was rolling. And then motherhood is just a big slap in the face. So needless to say, that was really tough. Had 12 months off, mat leave, came back in the patent attorney role. And then 2 years later, the pandemic hit, which just is another catastrophic event in everyone's life. I was in Melbourne. So I don't need to say anything more about that.
No.
But, you know, I was in Melbourne working from home, still exhausted, having a toddler. She was 3 at the time. And I just got to a point where I was like, oh man, I just can't do this anymore. You know, like I can't balance everything that I want to balance. I'm dropping the balls and everything is shattering around me. And I need to just take some time to kind of stop. But I think, like a lot of couples, you know, we deliberated over, you know, that COVID lockdown thing. Are we going to get a divorce? Are we going to have a COVID baby? Or am I just going to learn how to bake sourdough? Like, what are we doing here? And we contemplated all of them.
Very Melbourne of you.
Yeah. But we deliberated a lot, very robustly, about having a second child. And we decided that it was not in our best interest to do that for a number of reasons. I had a really rough postpartum, didn't have a village around me. Closest kind of family was 90 minutes away, not a lot of friends close by, moved to a new suburb when I was 32 weeks pregnant. So I knew no one. I didn't know, like, you know, what were the good cafes? Where do you go for a walk? Like nothing, full clean slate. And again, that kind of A-type personality kicks in and everything just, you know, turns to shit because you're like, okay, there goes my routine. And oh my God, are we really doing this like sleep, feeding, and like that's on repeat? Like, is this my life now?
24/7? Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't get a moment to myself.
I know. And like, I honestly thought, like, I find it ironic that I'm such a planner and such a researcher. Like, that is in my DNA. But for whatever reason it was, maybe it was fear, I'm not sure. But I didn't plan for the postpartum period. Like, I just had no idea. I thought that you would just lean into this like motherly intuition thing that everyone told you about.
But no one prepares you for it either.
No.
Like I remember going to the prenatal classes.
Yes.
Yeah, I am actually, because I went to the prenatal classes and it was 2 lots. So my husband and I went. The first like 2 hours of the 4 hours was about the different stages of labor.
Yeah.
And I was like, seriously? And then I, at the time, had a breached baby. And I then said, what happens? They're like, oh, that happens. We discuss that next week. And then I'm like, and I then said, what about induction or cesarean? And she looked at me as though I was, you know, I was some other person. I was an alien for even asking that question. But it was all about birth. And I'm like, the birth lasts for like, for me, I was induced. So essentially it lasted, you know, a bit over a day and a half because of induction and stuff. But I was not at all prepared for what it's like. And my first was in the nursery then for 8 days. So no one actually ever even just marginally talks about what it's like to have a baby in the nursery and the emotional toll of leaving the hospital without a baby.
Yeah.
For the first time.
Yeah.
And when I got home, it was like, what the heck? I remember my husband, I was given the advice from a colleague at work. He and his wife had moved town and they looked at each other going, what the F do we do now? Like,
yes, absolutely. Like, I think those birthing classes, I was very angry about those birthing classes, about society, everyone around me. I was like, how dare you? I was like, are you all laughing at home? Because I am suffering so much. And I was just like, why hasn't anyone told me how hard this actually is? And you know, I think at best, I walked out of that birthing class going, oh, excellent. I know how to wrap my kid like a burrito. Like, oh, and newsflash, not all kids like to be wrapped like a burrito. Ding, 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 ding. My child, you know. So I was like, okay, so the only useful thing that I walked out of there with, my kid hates it. Excellent. Wow. Okay, we're all on track now. You know, like, it was just awful. And so I think in my head, I was like, okay, well, if I'm not having another baby because we can't do this, like my mental health absolutely spiraled. I wasn't diagnosed with postnatal anxiety, but I can assure you that I ticked all of those boxes. And so I kind of had that moment, like probably an existential crisis in that moment, like everyone was in COVID lockdown. But I just kind of thought to myself, you know what? I don't want any other mother or family to ever have to be in this situation where they say to themselves, we can't have another baby because we're so traumatized, or we don't have enough support, or we just don't think we can do it. I don't ever want that to happen to anyone else because it's a really shitty place to be in. And so what I decided to do was, again, this is probably what I should say in the beginning, I'm the type of person where I'm not going to whinge about it. I'm going to do something about it. And so I retrained as a postpartum doula. And so for all those playing at home, you're probably thinking, what is a postpartum doula? Lots of people have heard of birth doulas, but not postpartum doulas. It's kind of an emerging niche group, particularly here in Australia. And essentially, we provide in-home care to sleep-deprived and overwhelmed mothers. So after you have your baby, we come into your house, typically 3 hours at a time. We cook nourishing food. We sit on the couch and make you a cup of tea, listen to you, hold your baby while you go have a nice hot shower, do all like the things that you need as part of that village. And it's really funny. One of my earliest clients said to me, "Oh my God, Renee, you are like the Mary Poppins for mothers." And I was like, yeah, we are. Like I feel like that's such a good way to describe postpartum doulas, because that's what we do. We are the mothers of mothers, you know? So here we are, 3 big career changes.
Look, I think when you talk about non-linear careers, I think who actually has a linear career? I think I'm on my 4th or 5th career change as it is anyway. So
I don't think they exist anymore, particularly for women, I think.
Yeah, I think that, you hear about a lot of women, particularly after they've had kids. They've even had 12 months off to reevaluate, who am I? What's most important? How do I want to, spend my time? And I think that's where that's that big wake-up call of what's important. Society's let you think, right, you finish school, you do further study, you get a job, that's your track. Yeah. And then it's when women have babies, then they are forced to stop and think, well, oh my goodness, what's important to me? And
yes,
how did I get here? And
yeah,
I think that's also where you see so many women now starting their own businesses because of, that. And newsflash, starting your own business while having a young baby is like having 2 kids at the same time.
Absolutely.
If you're ever thinking of it, it's probably just as much work.
Yeah.
My recommendation is negotiate flexible work. It's a much easier path most times. But it's not there. But why don't we talk about postpartum enough? Like, why is it just so much focus is put on the birth, but not the aftermath, which we've got to raise this kid for a number of years?
Yeah. That's a really good point. I talk to families, and I say to them, if I bought you a ticket to New York City to run in the New York City Marathon in 6 months' time, what would you say to me? And more often than not, it's like, well, I'm not a runner. I'm not prepared. And I'm like, okay, well, that's fine, but I'm giving you 6 months. So what are you going to do about it? And so it's about planning ahead. Everyone's like, oh, wow, I'm going to run in the New York City Marathon and that sounds great. And it's like, yeah, but that's one event. Like, what's happening for the lead up? How are you going to sustain energy? How are you going to get through the race? How are you going to build your technique? Who's going to support you in all of those things? And so I think people need to kind of start shifting the conversation. And there's a lot of, maybe because of Hollywood, maybe because of society, maybe because of social media, we're all drummed in about, the birth, it's the big event. And, there's a lot of trauma around that, and that's getting a lot of airplay. But I think equally, there is a lot of trauma in postpartum. I had a beautiful pregnancy. I had a wonderful birth. Admittedly, it was an elective cesarean because my mental health went out the goddamn window. And so, I said to my OB, I'm not going to survive labor. Like, let's just all be honest here. And so I created like this really beautiful birth space, and it was everything that I wanted and needed. And hello, control freak. But the postpartum period is just not spoken about. And I think, we've lost our village, particularly here in the West. And I think there's a few factors. Families are nuclear families now. And so people are not living in a village or close in a town to one another. We're not surrounded by our mothers and aunties and cousins to observe and share stories and experiences. I personally think that the pendulum has swung way, to the left or right, whatever direction you want to call it, okay? But one way where women are put on this pedestal and we are given this label of superwoman, Wonder Woman, super mom, things like that. And we've been, I guess, conditioned to want it all, have it all at the same time by ourselves. And we've been rewarded for that. And that is how we have had to climb the ladder. And then you get to motherhood in your postpartum. And if you walk into motherhood with that exact same attitude, boy, oh boy, are you going to crumble? Because motherhood was not meant to be done by ourselves. We need a village. People say it takes a village to raise a child. Okay, that's great. It takes a village to raise a mother. That's what it is. Because if you look after a mum, she can look after the baby by herself. That's totally fine. That's what she's been born to do. Her physiology and biology and all the rest of it's there. But you need a village to support and raise a mother. And I really don't think that the focus is there anymore. And as I said, nuclear families and things like that, and like societal expectation.
And I think it's also like it's been amped up that, oh, you can do it. And I remember I had that exact mentality of, no, I can do it all. I don't need to ask for help. I'll be fine. And, it was, I'll get help with the birth, and I had a fantastic OB, and I was like, yeah, I'll be right. And then it wasn't until it was actually my first mother's group. We're going around the circle. And a friend of mine who's now a really close friend, she'd just lost her mum 6 weeks before her son was born. And she said one of the biggest learnings that was her is that it's okay to ask for help. And she said that if you open the door to help, and you accept it. And by that, if you saying yes to people, it allows people to keep saying and to keep offering.
Yes.
But if you start saying no, no one's going to offer to help. No one's going to be there to support you. And when she told me, like said this in this group, I was like, oh my God, light bulb moment. I was like, that's what I'm exactly doing. I remember saying to my mother-in-law, who's like been so supportive, she's like, I used to say to her, oh, no, it's all right. We don't need any food. No, it'll be fine. We can do it all and things. I don't know, when my second son was born, it was actually we had a COVID baby. And I was like, give me all the help you can get. I was like, yep. And people saying, I'll give you clothes. We'll give you this. I was like, I'll take it all. I don't need to use it all. But I was like, I'll accept it. And it was I have to say, it was a mindset shift. And it was like, you feel guilty for accepting help, but we shouldn't be made to feel guilty for asking for help. It's so integral in that postpartum period of, cook me a meal. And it's such a struggle because there's no guidebook. You don't know if your kid's going to sleep or not, colic or not, and breastfeed. Like, no one tells you as well how hard breastfeeding can be. And
oh God, yeah.
It's just a struggle. And the more that we can change that conversation around, it's okay. You don't need to do it all on your own.
Oh, absolutely. And I was 100% guilty of that. My husband, he's a very observant individual. And before my daughter had even arrived, he was like, I think we should engage a lactation consultant. I was like, why? He's like, I think we should get a cleaner. I was like, no. It's like, I think we should like form a relationship with like a nanny, because I think that's important. We don't have family and friends close by. And I was like, absolutely not. And do you know what we did? We did all three of those things when the shit hit the fan. And I was at a loss, and it was 10 times harder because I was so vulnerable and so tired and so depleted. And I was just like, please, anyone, please help me. Like, and that's just the hardest spot to be in.
Yeah. So from a postpartum doula perspective, like, is it better to engage you before the baby's born? And is it also when just like don't get to that, 11th hour of when really things are try and, ask for help earlier on?
I'm always an advocate of prevention is better than treatment. Having said that, though, we absolutely have probably 40% of our clients what I like to call DEFCON 4 situations where it's typically a family member, whether it be, the partner or mum-in-law or, sister, call us and go, she's not in a good way and we need someone there stat, and we just need help. We're so sleep deprived, we don't even know what to do. So that is always, always, always an opportunity for us to step in quite quickly. And we've got the luxury of being able to do that because Fill Your Cup is, 15 doulas strong as a Doula Village. But, I highly encourage people to engage a doula as early as possible, because I can't speak for other doulas, but at Fill Your Cup, as soon as you sign on and you're part of the village, you are part of the village. I'm not joking. Your care starts straight away. We've got a WhatsApp group with myself, the mum, partner, and the doula. And there's always conversing. There's never silly questions. It's like, how are you feeling? How are you going? What do you want to talk about this week? And, have you got any questions around XYZ? Or they're just having like a really rough week, which is, part and parcel of pregnancy. And we talk to them. So we are postpartum doulas, but if you catch us and get in early, we're pregnancy doulas as well. I've worked with mums with, during conception. So rounds of IVF and things like that. Sometimes it's really nice to just have that external support network where there's not going to be any judgment. It's going to be an impartial view, and it's just going to be someone who is there for you. There's no strings attached. There's no guilt. There's no burden. So yeah, prevention is better than treatment, I always think.
Yeah. So for a postpartum doula, what exactly do they do? You said that they come into the house. What exactly is Mary Poppins doing for us?
Yeah. So at Fill Your Cup, I guess our mamas would expect to receive what we call our mama menu about 5 to 7 days in advance. They get to choose a main meal and a snack. That menu has been curated by myself as a biochemist. I completely understand how to, I guess, replete mums in the thick of it, building up meals around high iron, rich in like good omega-3 fats, choline, vitamin C. So they get to choose from a menu, and then their doula then goes and sources all those ingredients fresh, and then they come to your house. And please, my goodness, do not clean the house before we get there. Do not clean the house. If you are in anything other than pajamas, I will probably send you back to get into your pajamas. And so then it's a 3-hour session. Every session is different every week for every different family, because it's about, what's going on for you during that week. Are you struggling with feeding? Are you struggling with sleep? Can you not switch your mind off? How are we going to kind of support you during that week? And it could be as easy as, we walk in, mum's falling to pieces, and we just hold the baby until they drift off to sleep, send mum back into the bedroom. She goes and has a nap for 2 hours. And then we crack on and start making the meals that she's chosen from the menu. So she's got like a really beautiful, nourishing, warm, hot lunch that she can eat with 2 hands. Because I don't know about you, Karina, but I didn't eat with 2 hands
for probably a year.
Yes, I was going to say 18 months, but
For quite a while.
No one ever tells you that. Like the fact that you turn into a child again because you need your partner to cut your food for you at the table.
But even my 5-year-old last night, he decided that he wanted to eat dinner sitting on my lap because he was just tired and had one of those days. And so I was like, okay, right, not a problem.
Just what we're doing. Mums are really good at adaptation, I think, which is good. But, for example, like, as I said, if you need support with feeding, the other thing is, as doulas, we are doulas, right? We stick within our scope. If you need a lactation consultant or a pelvic floor physiotherapist, or you need someone for massage or something like that, we organize and coordinate those appointments. So we've got an amazing database of allied healthcare professionals that we trust and that we have worked with. It's not like anyone can Google, right? But we've got kind of a very curated list of people that we work with, and we just organize those appointments for you. It's about taking the mental load off you wherever we possibly can. And so typically these programs kind of run for 6 to 10 weeks, weekly visits, or, some families, particularly first-time families, will say, oh, we'll have 2 sessions in the first week while we kind of ground ourselves and get a bit more confidence. And then it's weekly visits thereafter. But it's about supporting mum so she can then do everything she needs to do, which is feed, love, bond with her baby and get rest.
It's such an important skill and service to provide, because you don't realize what you need when you have a child, as what we've spoken about. But the more that you can actually feel relaxed, that has such a significant impact on your child, because our kids naturally, they've got this sixth sense. They know when you're stressed or it's busy, and they will pick up on those emotions. And it also comes out. If you're breastfeeding, it'll come out in your breast milk. If you're being able to, if you're stressed about breastfeeding, I struggled for like the first 6 to 8 weeks with both of my kids. I had small babies, and so it was always a struggle at the start. But then I think they also, and then your milk supply, and then as soon as you start to relax, things also start to get a bit easier as well. So if you know that part of like dinners and all that just household stuff, because usually by that stage as well, your partner unfortunately has gone back to work, usually full time. And so you're there during the day going, what the heck am I doing?
Yeah.
You're all alone because you've got no village around you. So having that support is so integral.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you said that, Karina, because I recently did a kind of like follow-up survey with a bunch of our clients, and a lot of them said, we engaged you primarily because we loved the practicalities around the fact that we would have beautiful, nourishing food in the house, and that you were going to tidy up and throw some washing on and hold bubby while I went and had a long hot shower by myself. Like they tick, 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 tick. They loved that. But a lot of them said the number one thing that they underestimated about having a doula there each week was the continuity of care and what that did for their mental health. And so because they knew, okay, I'm having a really shit week, but I just need to hold out till Wednesday. Renee's coming, or Amanda or Georgie or whoever it was. And so they knew that was coming, and that they were going to be able to have an opportunity to debrief with someone who is professionally trained to do that, and to not feel lonely in the house. Like, I don't know about you, but I underestimated that. the fact that there was another human being in the house, but I had never felt more lonely than I did when I was in those early postpartum days, when your partner goes back to work. It's scary, right?
It's scary and it's isolating. And I particularly remember I discovered Mums and Bubs at the movies.
Oh.
And so regardless of a good movie, bad movie, I still tried to go because it got me out of a house and it was a commitment. Like, right, Tuesday, 10 o'clock, I know that I'd be able to go to the movies. And it was like, your baby's still relatively small, so you can still like watch the movie, breastfeed, because it's like it's a safe zone.
Yeah.
And it's a couple of times, like in the months and years after it, my husband was like, have you seen this? I'm like, yeah, I saw this at Mums and Bubs. And he just get really jealous. And so there was like once or twice he actually came along because he was jealous that I kept going to the movies without him because it's something that he loves to do. And I think it was like one time was Mission Impossible or something. And it was great. It just got me, it was like, as what you said, a commitment to get me out of the house.
Yeah.
And actually having a bit of like, for the first one, I'm like, I'm just here. I'm pretty much, there's like two other women in the movie theater. But I was like, I don't care if I'm here on my own. I'm physically out of the house. I've actually put on normal clothes.
Yes.
And then my mum started coming as well. So it was also a good way. She'd sometimes just sit there holding my son and she enjoyed that. But it was just those things of not feeling so alone. And then once I got into a mother's group, it certainly helped. But because sometimes mother's groups don't start for a couple of months in. So you're feeling.
Or you don't click with them.
You don't click with them and things like that. So my first mother's group fell because there was only like 4 people that came. And then the second one was 15 people and now there's 4 of us. And like still to this day, those 3 other women have been my rock for the last 5 years. I think I would have been mentally just crazy if it wasn't for them keeping me grounded. So they've been my doulas in a sense, because also going from 1 to 2 kids is also just a shock that no one ever tells you about. And it's such a change, but it's so good that doulas can actually fill that void as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting you talk about the movie thing. I loved going to the movies pre-baby, and someone said to me, oh, you could never take your baby to the movies. Because I was like, oh yeah, Mums and Bubs. And I think this is one of the things that I would really love to highlight, particularly in this postpartum period, because there's a lot of plasticity in your brain as a mother that starts as soon as you conceive your child. Your brain starts to remodel, and there's just, I guess, a lot of openings and new kind of knowledge being built. We level up in areas like empathy, emotional intelligence, facial recognition, temperature, with like very sensory kind of on. And so that's why misinformation is so easy for mums to kind of take on, because if you think about us in everyday life, we're almost got like a bullshit radar and we're like, okay, that's just crazy. That's not true. But when we're going through this, what's called matrescence, and we've got this brain remodeling, we take on a lot more information and we don't have as fine a filter, if you want to think about it like that. So I remember this particular person saying to me, you can't go to the movies. It will destroy your baby's hearing, and they shouldn't be seeing big, pictures like that. Like that whole, don't put your kid in front of a screen thing.
Yeah.
And it terrified me, Karina. At the time, I was like, is there logic to that? Like, is that real? But because she put the wind up me, I never went.
Oh,
and
no.
I would have loved, because I'm such a movie buff, but I was like, nope. And there was people in my mother's group who were going, and I was like, nope, I can't do it because someone has told me all of this stuff, which is, I think, when you've got a postpartum doula, that would have been a really prime time for me to have said to a postpartum doula, which I did not have, but it would have been a really nice opportunity for me to be like, oh my God, do you know what Wendy down the road told me? And they would have been like, what? And I would have told them, and they would have been like, do you really think that that's true though, Renee?
Yeah.
They
would have said then it's not as loud as a normal movie. The lights are slightly, they're a little bit different to a normal surroundings. You'll be fine.
Exactly. And
The
I
baby's
guess,
not watching the screen anyway because
I know
usually they're still
he's
asleep.
watching your boob. Like, don't worry about it.
My son was either asleep or he was feeding, and it was brilliant. And that's why I went when he was so young. And that's what's devastating with my second. I think I went once or twice, and then because of COVID, we couldn't go. So I was like, damn, it was one thing I was looking forward to.
Movie time.
Oh, so how can so we've talked about like what postpartum is and that, but how can we prepare for it? Like, are there any steps or any things that we can go through? And so if you're listening to this and you're about to go on maternity leave, how can we, you're going to have the birth, we all prepare for that. But
yeah,
what about that postpartum phase? What are some things that we can put into place?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do a postpartum planning session with all of our clients if they're in pregnancy. Obviously, the DEFCON 4 situation is a little bit different, but we kind of have 7 elements that we talk to people about during this game planning session. And it's not about, do you have enough onesies? And have you got the quote unquote right nappies? I couldn't care less about that stuff. That's not what a postpartum doula is there to talk to you about. If you want to check in about the onesies and the nappies, go for it. Like, we're totally there to do that as well. But in terms of planning, the first step that we always talk about is visitors and boundaries, because more often than not, you need to get on the same page as your partner. You need to start thinking about, who's going to be at the hospital on the day of the birth versus 3 days after versus 3 weeks. Are you going to have visitors home? Are you going to announce the birth? Are you going to hold off for a week so you guys can chill out and nest and bond together at home? You guys need to get on the same page about visitors. The other thing that I say is that the partner needs to be the gatekeeper, because mum should not be a liaising and, pulling together her Calendly app on, who's coming, who's going. And by goodness, no one should be entertaining the visitors. The visitors are to BYO and DIY everything. And I always have this running joke that if visitors want to have a cuddle with the baby, they need to earn it.
They need to ask for it as well. It can't be given.
Oh God, yeah. But if you don't come with a meal, for anyone listening and someone who's pregnant, who's about to have a baby, do not go to their house unless you are coming with a meal or you plan to do some sort of domestic duty, i.e. dishwasher, vacuuming, laundry, or you are going to hold that baby while those parents either nap or shower or do some self-care. You need to
make yourself useful. And
yes. Otherwise you're out. You're out the door. The second thing that we talk about is rest, because, more often than not, and probably your audience as well, working mums, career orientated, go. And then you're like, oh my God, I got to switch my brain off. How do I do that?
That was me on my first day of mat leave. What do I do now?
Yes.
I don't have a meeting at 9 a.m. Monday morning.
I know. I remember texting a friend going, I'm bored already. And I think it had been 3 hours. And she was like, oh my God, Renee. And she'd already had 2 kids. She was like, read a book, go to the park, sit by yourself, go to the movies. And I was like, I don't think I can do that because my brain is spiraling. And she was like, mate, you're going to have to pick something from there. But so in terms of rest, if you're one of those highly strung people like I am, think about how you're going to navigate that. I have started doing yoga nidra, and I always recommend, it's the only app. Oh no, there's 2 apps that I always recommend. One is the Insight Timer app, because it's free and you can download 20,000 different meditation things. So there's really beautiful yoga nidra on there. It's just someone talking to you really sweetly about how you should relax. That's really good for highly strung people like myself. So that's visitors and rest. The third element is food, which is totally my jam. I'm a complete crazy person when it comes to food and nutrition. And the number one tip I give here is fill your freezer like a doomsdayer. No joke. Like if someone said to you, you are not going to be able to leave the house, order groceries, anything for 2 weeks, what does that look like? Breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, particularly if you're breastfeeding. And if you can't fill your freezer, organize a meal train, which is, you know, people dropping off meals on specific days and things like that. Again, leaning in, asking for help. I know it's hard, but
just do it. It's worth it.
Just do it. People, you know, people actually really do want to help you. Like, I don't know about you, Karina, but when someone asks me for help and I get to help, I get like a little boost of oxytocin. I'm like,
yeah.
Woo!
A friend of mine was sick a little while ago, and we were like, right, how do we help her? Okay, a friend of mine was going to the shops, buying stuff. It was just before Easter. She got the kids some stuff, hot grass buns, cheesy mite scrolls. She delivered it. My friend that received it literally started crying. She's like, oh my God, like she just forgets that there's people wanting to help her. And we all felt amazing because we could help one of our really good friends.
Yeah, it's a feel-good thing. So everyone's winning. My fourth tip is think about your inner circle. And when I talk about inner circle, I get families to write down the name and the number of people in answer to these questions. Who can you call for non-judgmental support and advice? Who are you going to call to take your baby for a walk while you nap or shower? And if you don't have a doula there, who are you going to call to make you a nutritious meal? Who are you going to call if you want to literally just sit, watch Netflix, shitty TV, eat like a packet of Tim Tams and, you know, just copious amounts of like chai lattes or whatever it is? Who are those people? Because I can assure you that there will come a day where you're going to need to lean on one or more of those people. And I think that's a really good one to have, particularly for partners who are going to work thinking, oh man, I really don't want to be going to work today because she is not in a good way. And we've had a really rough night with Bubby and they feel guilty. And, you know, mum's probably feeling resentful. I've felt a lot of resent with my husband going to work every day.
The 2 worst years of my marriage and my relationship with my husband have been when I've been on mat leave.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And so, but if you have that inner circle written down and like on the fridge right there, it's a classic, like, I'm just like partner. Don't ask and go, oh, do you want me to call so-and-so? Don't ask. She doesn't need the mental load. Just do it. And it's a pleasant surprise. And then we talk about community village. So that's your inner circle, then community village. So write down the name and number of like lactation consultant, pelvic floor physio, cleaner, massage therapist, psychologist. My goodness, everyone needs a bit of a debrief, even if you have had a non-traumatic birth. Everyone needs that. And the last 2 are oxytocin boosters, we call them. So it's getting people to think about, what is it that brings you peace and joy? So, for example, for myself, I loved driving the car, windows down, music pumping. Like I love music. That's my kind of emotional kind of channeling type of thing. And that is something I really missed because when I got in the car, there was a baby. I don't, see myself turning up the volume very loud when the baby's in the car. So it's about thinking about activities around self-care, because we know from the research that mothers who take 30 minutes per week for self-care are 3 times less likely to develop postnatal depression and relative kind of symptoms. So it's really important, again, prevention rather than treatment. And I know some people are like, oh my God, self-care, that's going to take me ages and I can barely shower in the day and all that kind of stuff. That's totally fine. I hear you. So we get our mums to write down something that will take 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And no matter what you've got during the day, you need to practice one of those four. Like the 1 minute one could just be, you know, sitting in your feeding chair and you just close your eyes and you just take a couple of deep breaths, ground your feet, and just have a moment to yourself. You know, it can just be as simple as that. And then the seventh point, which I am on a massive bandwagon kind of thing at the moment, is what we call divide and conquer. And it's all about understanding how the household is going to change when the baby arrives in terms of chores. You know, who's going to feed the dog? Who's going to take the dog for a walk? Who is going to, you know, water the plants? What's happening with your toddler? Who's doing the shopping, be it groceries? Who's organizing birthday presents? What does that look like? And I got onto an amazing book called Fair Play by Eve Rodsky.
Great book, yeah.
Just like she's a force to be reckoned with. And it's great. It's about, you know, not having equal work, but, you know, fair work, and that balancing act of what that looks like. And I think these are all, you know, those 7 points are all conversation starters for people to get on the same page and work through what does this actually look like? Because I hear about people who are like, oh, our life's not going to change when we have a baby. We're just going to do business as usual. And I'm like, yeah, we'll see about that.
It always cracks me up. Oh, it'll be fine. We'll just keep going. We'll just keep going out.
We'll just keep doing it. I'm like,
the baby will fit in with our life. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. I'll see you in 6 months in therapy. Start saving.
Oh, it's one of those things. And I think also, particularly on that 7th point around the mental load, that's such a good conversation to have before you're having kids, because it changes. And then it's also about, once you've had a child, assessing it. And then even then when you go back to work.
Yes.
Because as statistics show, women will take on more of the mental load when she's on maternity leave because she's at home.
Yep.
She may have some time and also she may elect to do that. But when she returns back into work, usually she's got her work commitments. She's taken on more of the mental load, also the caring responsibilities. So she's pretty much doing double than what she was potentially 12, 18 months ago.
Yep.
And then she gets back to work going, oh my goodness, how am I going to do all this? The balls are just, you know, the squishy balls and also the glass balls are all dropping, and it's just not a good look. So having those conversations, particularly at those key milestone points, are so integral. And if it's just calling it out, yes, they can be hard conversations. Your husband or partner may go, no, I don't necessarily agree with it. Well, it's like, mate, you've taken 2 to tango.
Yeah.
Regardless
Buckle up.
Buckle up. And regardless of how much you earn, you know, you still got responsibilities.
Yes.
And not everything falls on. I remember saying to my husband very clearly, I'm not doing all the drop off and pickups at childcare. Ironically, now he actually does a lot more than what I do, which is ironic, but just because of location of our offices.
Yeah.
But he also at the same time loves doing it. So
yeah.
I'm fine with it. But we had the conversation at the start to say, no,
I'm sure you do more of some other tasks.
Oh,
like, and I think,
but it all evens it out. Like he does all the
Exactly.
washing. He hates me doing the washing because he doesn't like how I use too much softener. And I'm like,
oh,
all right, mate, you want to do it? That's fine.
Yeah.
But then I do all the grocery shopping and meal planning. So that's how we even it out.
Exactly. And I think that's, you know, when I first came to my husband with the book and I pushed it across the kitchen bench and I said, I think we're going to do this. And he said, what is that? And I said, I think we need to reevaluate how our household functions, because I was that person who took on all of the mental load and the caregiving, and then, you know, went back to work as an attorney. And I was like, hold on, I've got 2 jobs and I'm only getting paid for one. Like, what's this all about? And wondered why I was so, as I said, resentful, depleted, anxious, overwhelmed, you know. And it's not to say he didn't do anything, but the scales were definitely tipped in one direction.
But definitely having those conversations. And it's just, I think, probably pretty much throughout your points, it's about communication, not only with yourself, the stories that you're telling yourself, the communication you're having with your partner, with your village, but also because I know as mums at times, I don't know about you, but I internalize a lot. And the way I think of something, I'll tell all these stories. And then as soon as I start verbalizing it, my husband's like, that is crazy. What? That's nuts. Like, you don't need to think that way. Or something like that. That's not too articulate. You're like, oh yeah, that is a bit nuts and a bit crazy. And I've said to my husband more recently, my mindset's actually my biggest downfall at times. And he goes, yes, it is. But it's one of those things, it's communication. And the more that we can communicate and not be scared about communicating about if we're having a crappy day, just own it. I remember my husband a couple of times with my first son going, he'd walk in. I remember one time the lights were all black. It was like that. And he's like, what's going on here?
Yeah. That's interesting because typically the clients who we take on, they kind of fall, I would say, into a few different categories. One are those who, as I said, nuclear families, they don't have families close by, whether it be interstate or international. The other ones are people with a small business or their partner's got a small business. But the third one are those who have pre-existing mental health issues. And so they have already identified, whether it be through their own kind of healthcare team, that they're going to need additional help and they're going to need that person to come in. And so what we then do is implement a strategy very similar to what you were talking about, where we can walk into the house at the start of the session and we use like a bit of a scale. And I'll say, Karina, what are you out of 10 today? And it's not, because sometimes it's too much for them to do the full debrief with you in that moment. But if they say to me, I'm an 8 out of 10 today, as in not good, then we cater around that and we work with them with that kind of diagnosis. And the other thing about, calling on your village is if they want us to tap into, having communication with their counselor or psychologist or whoever it is, then we all work together to support that mum, because we all kind of need to know what page and what situation we're walking into. So I think that that's another really useful thing to have as a doula who can communicate with your village as well.
And also advocating for how you are and what your needs are and recognizing those needs. Because as new mums, you think, oh, look, I'm just having an off day. But an off day for consistently for multiple weeks is probably a bit of a sign. So it's good that the doulas are there around that. I know we could talk all day on this. But is there anything just finally that you'd like to just add about postpartum planning and doulas and just any other hints and tips that we may not have already covered?
Good question. I think if anyone's interested in having a postpartum doula, I think one of the biggest hurdles here in Australia is the fact that it's not a regulated industry. And I think that confuses some people. They probably go in and think, oh my goodness, where do we start? And how do we know a good doula from quote unquote a bad doula or whatever that looks like? And I think, with my science and law background, I identified that pretty quickly. And it was such an uncharted territory for me because I was looking for, the rules and legislations and codes of conducts and things like that. And so that's what I'm trying to change with Fill Your Cup. So it started with just 2 of us, and now we've grown to 15 across 3 states, Tasmania, Victoria, and New South Wales. And what I'm trying to develop is essentially the McDonald's of mother care, because I want everyone to understand that if you come to Fill Your Cup, it is a very high bar in terms of training, professionalism, the work that we do internally as doulas I think is second to none. We provide amazing resources and training to our doulas. They get extra training around, postpartum nutrition and mental health awareness, around sleep and feeding and sensory nourishment for infants, because that is a really big topic that always brings anxiety and overwhelm to families. Feeding and sleep, two of the biggest topics that we always get asked, is this normal? Is that normal? Oh my goodness, this is happening today. I don't know what to do with XYZ. And so all of our doulas are trained in that. And so that's what we're doing here at Fill Your Cup, to kind of build awareness and a trusted brand so people can come to us and go, okay, I know that, that level of professionalism and expertise are there. But I think if you don't have access to a doula, or, you don't have the finances for a doula, there was a study a few years back and they surveyed a number of mothers, and they showed that there was 4 key elements to a mum thriving in that first 6 to 12 months after she had her baby. And those 4 elements were information, so getting realistic and reliable information. It was around getting practical and emotional support, someone bringing meals or helping with tidying up around the house and things like that. It was getting psychological support. So that was even in a situation where you hadn't had a traumatic birth and there wasn't much trauma or overwhelm in your postpartum, but psychological support was really fundamental. But one of the key things was sharing of experiences. And it was around normalizing motherhood. Because I think as soon as we start to share our experiences and understand as mothers that these particular scenarios that are happening to us are happening to a lot of other mothers, I feel like the judgment, the guilt, the overwhelm, the anxiety, it starts to dissipate. And so I would highly encourage the listeners or those supporting people who are pregnant, start thinking about those 4 key elements: information, practical and emotional support, psychological support, and sharing of experiences, and see how you can implement those and start building your village around you to, hold up those pillars, because they are the key elements that you're going to need.
Wow, what an amazing way to finish and such important information. So no, thank you so much for that, Renee, and what you're doing to support women in this such important phase and also raise awareness with it, which I know you're doing a lot around. So how do we get in touch with you with Fill Your Cup?
So we are typically on Instagram, which is at fillyourcup_. Otherwise, you can jump on to our website, ifillyourcup.com. And we have actually just recently released what we call the Quickie Guide. I kept getting a lot of people asking, oh, there's podcasts and there's books and, my mother-in-law's told me to listen to that or read this, but I just don't know where to start. And so I was like, okay, again, I'm going to do something about this. I'm not going to whinge about it. So we've put together, essentially, it's like a springboard of information around all those elements that I've spoken about, nutrition, oxytocin, chores, relationships, how to transition your toddler, your fur babies even. So that's a free download on our website. If you just jump on our website, it's up the top in the banner, our Quickie
We'll provide
Guide.
a link into the show notes so you can.
Yes,
if you want to download it.
Thank you. It's what I like to call our go-to guide for, your best 4th trimester, because you deserve it. You absolutely deserve to thrive and have a really positive experience. So there's that. And then we also have a couple of beautiful, nourishing products, which you can't see bet you will be able to hear. But we've got our choc goji lactation cookie mix, our creamy coconut dal mix, which is first in market to have organic bone broth in it. So those two meal kits can be whipped up in like 20 minutes flat. And then once you've got a really full, beautiful tummy, you can take a soak in our postpartum recovery sits, which like, oh my God, I'm totally addicted to. And I still have the lactation cookies in my fridge all the time. And I'm 6 years postpartum. I'm obsessed. It's like if you like cherry ripe, because they've got dark chocolate and the goji berries in it. And it's just like so my jam. So
yum.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very, very good. Very good.
So good. Well, thank you so much for today's chat, Renee. Like, you're a wealth of knowledge, and you can tell your passion and enthusiasm based off your own experiences to support women in the postpartum period, and certainly keep smashing those goals, and keep doing what you're doing in the advocacy as well, because it's making such a difference. And I know certainly I didn't know a lot about postpartum doulas before I met you, but I think I definitely needed it, particularly with my second. But thank you so much and really appreciate it. So check out Fill Your Cup. And if you're listening to this and you're soon to have a bub, check them out. And if you've just had a bub, congratulations, check out Renee as well.
Thank you so much, Karina.
Thank you for listening to the Working Mama podcast. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast catcher. Please also feel free to contact me on any of the Working Mama social channels. Remember, Mama is MUMMA, or website www.workingmama.com.au. I would appreciate you to share this podcast with friends and colleagues, especially those that are parents managing the juggle. And I would really appreciate if you had to take the time out to leave a review of the podcast. Thank you, and see you next time. Have a great week.